my own dearest Elizabeth. Your last letter lies open before me as I write, and I have read it so many times in these few days that the creases are already worn in it. When I first saw your hand upon the outside, my heart lifted within me, for there are times here when a man feels as if the world is drawn in close about him, and the only true breath left is what comes from home. You wrote, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. And I've said those words to myself more than once since, not as a fine saying to be admired, but as a thing to be held to. I was glad to hear you speak in better spirits, when you wrote that you felt more like yourself again, and that the physician did not think your ailment of such gravity as you feared. It eased me in a manner I cannot express. Do not ask you to make light of yourself for my sake, or speak only cheerful things, for I would rather know the truth. But I confess to you, your letter came to me like water to a thirsty man. You spoke also of the early spring work, and how the yard has begun to show green again, and how the peach tree put out buds even after the late cold. I could see it in my mind as plainly as if I stood at our door. These small accounts from your hand of common life do more to keep a man steady than all the speeches and orders in the world. You asked in your letter how Caleb has been since the late affair, and you spoke of him with such kindness that I had to lay your pages down a moment. You said you remembered him in your prayers, and that you hoped the Lord would sustain him under his burden as he sustains us all. My dear wife, it is of Caleb that I must now write to you, and I would that I could write with a firmer hand. Caleb is gone from us. I do not know how to set those words down without feeling as if my heart were being pressed in a vice. I've written you of men going missing, and of strange things that have happened on the picket. You've read it with fear, no doubt, and with prayers. Yet all that was in a certain sense distant, because those men were not yours as Caleb is, being known to you from before the war, and dear to you for my sake as well as for his own. I must tell you the whole as plainly as I can, for I would not have any confusion between us. If I wander in my telling, forgive me. My thoughts do not fall into order easily in these days. For some weeks after the skirmish of which I wrote you last, Caleb held himself much as he always has done, doing his duty without fault and bearing his sorrow without complaint. He spoke less, it is true, and there were hours when he would sit with us face turned toward the fire and seem not to see it. Yet when I addressed him, he answered, and there were moments, though fewer, when the old warmth showed itself. More than once I thought that perhaps the danger I feared for him was only my own anxious fancy. Then there began to come upon him certain times that I could not call by any other name, faint spells. He'd be with me, speaking of some common matter, and all at once his words would fail him, and he would sit very still, listening, as if something beyond our hearing had drawn his mind away. First time I saw it, I asked him if he were ill. He said no, only tired. Yet I watched him more closely after that, and I found the same thing returning, most often toward evening, when the light is going down and the camp grows quiet. It was as if the day held him up with its noise and its duties, and that loosened something in him. One night, not long after, I woke before dawn and found him not in his place. Stepped out softly, thinking he might have gone aside, and I saw him a little way off, when firelight runs thin and the dark begins. Stood there with his hands at his sides, not moving, his face turned toward the timber. Called his name under my breath, not wishing to rouse the whole camp. He did not answer at first. When I spoke again, he turned, slowly, as a man turns when he has been deep in thought, and he looked at me as if he did not at once know where he was. I asked him what he did there. He said after a moment that he thought he had heard something. I asked him what he thought he had heard. He shook his head a little, as if to clear it, and said he could not rightly tell. He made some small jest, as if to put the matter away, and asked why I was abroad at such an hour. I told him I had waked and found him gone. He said he'd only come out for air, and that I need not trouble myself. Yet when I took him by the arm, his sleeve felt cold, but the night was not so cold as it had been in March, and his arm did not warm mine as it should. I drew him back toward the tent, and he came with me without resistance. Yet it seemed to me, as we walked, that he looked over his shoulder once, as if half unwilling to leave what lay beyond the firelight. I did not speak of this to others, for I had not wished to shame him or to make him the subject of talk. I spoke with him the next day, gently, told him that if he felt pressed in mind, he must not go alone into the dark, but wake me, come sit by the fire, speak with the chaplain. He said he understood. He promised me he would not do such a thing again. I believe he meant it when he said it. A few days after that, there was a change in the picket arrangements. The officers have been strict in these matters since the skirmish and since the other disappearances. There's been much watching of the river road and of the timber. One morning, when the details were called, an older man in our company has been much worn and whose nerves are poor begged off, saying he had not slept and feared he would not keep his senses on the line. The officer spoke harshly to him and would have forced him out. Caleb stepped forward then and said he would take the man's place. I told him he need not, that I would go, or that the officer could take another, but Caleb said quietly that he was able, and it was no great matter. There was something in his manner that made the officer accept it at once. That evening, before he went out, Caleb spoke to me more kindly than he had spoken in some days. He asked after you by name and said he hoped you were well, and that if ever he got home again, he would sit at our table and hear you scold him for eating too fast. He said with a small smile. For a moment, I felt my fear ease. I told him to be watchful and to keep his mind upon his duty, and he said he would. Watched him go with the others into the dusk, and I remember thinking, God keep him. In the morning, when the relief went out, Caleb's post was empty. At first there was confusion, and then there was anger. Then there was a kind of silence that I cannot set down. His musket was found not far from the place where he should have stood, leaning against a tree, as if he had set it there for a moment and made to take it up again. There was no sign of a struggle. The ground showed tracks for a little way. Caleb was among them, going toward the timber. Then they were lost where the earth was soft and the grass broken. We searched. I went with the first party and with the second. We called, though not loudly at first, and then more loudly, and there was no answer. We went as far as the officers would allow without throwing the whole line into confusion. We found nothing Elizabeth. Not his cap, not his blanket, not so much as a shred caught on the branch. When we came back, the officer spoke of desertion and of punishing him if he were taken. I could not keep my temper, and I told him, with as much respect as I could force, the man does not desert in his shirt sleeves and leave his gun behind him. The officer looked at me in a way that warned me not to go further, and the chaplain afterward advised me to hold my tongue, saying that in the army men must have their explanations. I know that, yet I tell you plainly, my dear wife, that my heart will not accept the word desertion. It is not fit. It's like putting a wrong label on a thing and calling it settled. Since then, the camp has been as if some hand had passed over it and pressed it down. Men speak lower. They watch one another. You cannot linger alone. There are those, I believe, who would willingly go in a group of 10 to meet the enemy's fire, but they fear to stand 1 hour by themselves near the timber. I've seen men who would once have laughed at any tale of darkness, now cross themselves before taking their post, or whisper a prayer without knowing they did so. As for me, I feel as if a part of my own strength went out with Caleb. There are moments when I think, if I'd only spoken differently that night, if I'd only not let him take that watch, if I'd insisted more strongly, perhaps he would be here. And I rebuke myself, for I know that a man cannot order another man's soul as he orders his feet. Yet the thought returns when I wake, returns when I lie down, returns even in the midst of duty, like a stone in the shoe that will not be shaken out. I've tried to pray it out, and I do pray. Yet I'm ashamed to tell you how my mind runs away in the midst of it, as if something pulls the thread of my thoughts and breaks it. I will begin, and then, before I know it, I'm thinking of the timber, or of Caleb's musket leaning there, or of his face when he looked over his shoulder. I force myself back again and say, God is our refuge and strength. And I take hold of the words, and then takes hold of a rail. Still the wandering comes. I've never known my mind so restless, and yet so heavy at the same time. Since Caleb went missing, I've found myself doing things in a way that frightens me after. A man spoke to me yesterday, and I answered him in such a flat tone that he looked at me as if I'd insulted him. I'd not meant to. I'd not even felt ill will. I felt nothing for a moment, and that is what struck me afterward. Another time, when the call came for a hard detail, I stepped forward without thinking, as some of the quiet men do, and only later wondered why I did not hesitate. It is not courage. I know what courage is, and I know what fear is. This is something else, like being carried along on a current without choosing it. When I feel that in myself, I am afraid. You may think I write too freely of my inward state, but you are my wife, and my heart has no other place to lay its burdens. If I keep these things shut up, I fear they will eat me as they have eaten others. So I set them down, not to trouble you. Speaking to you has always been like opening a window in a closed room. There have been other changes since the skirmish, and the loss of Caleb is not the only one, but it is the one that struck me to the quick. Some of the wounded from the fight of March have since died. There were men who walked back from the line, pale and shaking, lived 2 days, or 5, or 10, and then went under, as if the ball had not killed them, but only marked them. There have been more letters from home with bad tidings. Each mail call seems to bring more grief into camp, and grief works on men in different ways. Some weep and are eased. Some curse and afterward are ashamed. Some pray. It's the silent ones that trouble me most. Those whose sorrow does not break out but sinks down, makes them seem as if they are already half gone. The officers, I believe, do not know what to do with such men. In truth, many officers seem glad of them. They call them steady. They call them reliable. They say they wish more men were like that. It is a hard thing, Elizabeth, to hear a man praised for what is, to my mind, a kind of death. I've seen those quiet ones work without complaint, take the worst posts, march with empty faces, and never once speak of home. They are useful, as a tool is useful. You had not trade one true laugh, one honest tear, for all the steadiness in the world. After Caleb was gone, and searches come to nothing, I could bear it no longer in my mind. And I did a thing I never thought I would do. I went of my own will toward the Indian camp. You know how I have spoken of them before, and how they keep much among themselves. I did not go with any thought of curiosity, but because I felt as if I stood upon the edge of something I did not understand, and they, more than any others, seemed to know where that edge lay. I asked for the older man who had spoken to me before, the one who knows some English. At first they looked at me with reserve, and I cannot blame them, for we are not their people. Yet one of them called the elder, and he came and stood by the fire, very grave. I told him, as plainly as I could, that another man had gone, and that this time it was one dear to me. He listened without changing his face, and when I spoke Caleb's name, he nodded once, as if the name meant little to him, but the fact meant much. I asked him what takes them. He did not answer at once. He looked toward the timber and back to me, and he said a word in his own tongue that I cannot rightly spell. He said it sounded like "Shay-lup," though I did not answer for the sound. He touched his breast when he said it, and he spoke another word like "Shilum-bish," and he pointed outward away from himself. I understood little, but I understood enough to feel cold. He tried, in his broken way, to make me see that a man has, as he believes, an inside shadow and an outside shadow. He said the inside is the true life of the man, the part that feels and loves and hopes. The outside is what walks and is seen. He said the thing they call Nalusa Cheeto eats the inside shadow when it finds it weak and open. And then the man may still walk and work, yet he is empty within. I asked him if such a man can be brought back. He shook his head slowly. He said once the inside is eaten, it does not return. He said the body may go on, but it is light, the dark can carry it away. I asked him why the men go into the timber. He answered in few words, yet they have stayed with me. Said the dark calls what is already hollow, and it calls with voices that sound near and familiar and kind. He told me not to answer any voice out there, no matter how it speaks. He told me if I hear my own name in the timber, stay where there is light and company, and speak to another man and not to go alone. He looked at me very hard when he said this, and I felt, though he did not say it, that he meant he feared for me as well. I am ashamed to confess to you that I said to him, almost in anger, that I do not hold with heathen tales, that the Lord is stronger than any darkness. He did not dispute me. He only nodded, as if he had heard such words before, and he said in his halting English that the Lord is strong, but men are weak, and sorrow makes holes. He said that when men sit alone and do not speak, the holes grow. Then he added very softly that the thing is old, older than our war, and that it does not care what flag a man follows, it cares only for what breaks him. I left their fire with my mind in a storm. I wished to dismiss it. I wished to laugh at myself for giving ear to such talk, yet I could not. Not after Caleb. Not after the other men. Not after what I have seen in some faces, empty as a house with the lamp put out. That same evening, the search was made again. A longer one than the officers usually allow. There were some who had loved Caleb as well, and the chaplain himself urged it. We went toward a low place where the ground dips and the timber thickens. The light was failing. The air was still. There were birds at first, and then fewer. I do not know how to describe what happened without sounding like a man carried away by fancy. Yet I will set it down plainly. At a certain point where the trees stand close and the ground is broken with roots, I saw, between two trunks, a darkness that did not look like the common shade. It was not the absence of light only. It was blacker than the shadows around it, as if it drank what little light remained. It had, for a moment, the height and shape of a man standing still. I stalked without meaning to. My breath caught. I could not make my feet move forward. No one else spoke. I do not know if the others saw it as I did, or if my eyes played me false. In that instant, I felt that same heaviness I told you of once before, only stronger, as if it had had a hand upon my shoulder. It's like the weight of the deep weariness, and it came with a thought, not in words spoken aloud, but in the mind, that all searching is useless, and all striving is useless, and that I should stop. It was as if surrender were the easiest thing in the world. I cannot tell you what saved me in that moment, except that your letter was in my pocket, and I had touched it with my hand before we set out, as if it were a charm. Thought of you and of the verse you wrote, that God is our refuge and strength. That forced my lips to form the words, though no sound came. And then the feeling broke like a wave that passes. When I looked again, the place between the trees was only a place between trees. The dusk deepened. Search went on. We found nothing. We returned at last, weary and muddy and empty-handed. I cannot describe to you the look on some faces when they gave up. It was as if they were not only giving up the search, but giving up something else within themselves. I felt it in myself too. I hated it. Since Caleb's disappearance, there are times when I think I hear him. Not his voice calling as in speech, but the sound of his step, or the small clearing of the throat he used to make before he spoke, or the rustle of his blanket. I know it is only the mind, for a mind will cling to what it has lost. Yet it troubles me because it makes me feel, for a moment, that he is near. And then the moment passes, and the loss returns fresh, like a wound opened again. I tell you these things, my dear wife, not to torment you, but because you asked about Caleb, and because you and I have never hid our hearts from one another. I know you will grieve, as I grieve. And perhaps you will sit with his mother in your thoughts and pray for her, though she does not yet know what has become of her son. I have written to her, or Tried to. Began the letter twice and could not finish it. I will write again, and I must, for it is a duty. Yet my hand shakes when I think of it, and my mind runs away like a frightened horse. Do not think, however, that I have cast off my faith. If I had nothing but my own strength, I would already have sunk. Yet I do believe that the Lord sees, even when we do not see, and that He is present, even when we feel only absence. I do not understand why He permits such things, and I will not pretend to understand. I only know that if I let go of Him, there is nothing beneath my feet but mud and darkness. You wrote in your letter that you were praying, not only for my safety, but that I might be kept from losing myself. Those were your words. I did not know at first how to take them, for a man does not like to think of himself as in danger of becoming other than he is. Yet now I know what you meant. Pray for me, Elizabeth. Pray that I may not become one of those quiet ones who move and work and answer, yet are empty within. Pray that I may speak when I ought to speak, and not sit alone with my sorrow till it eats through me. Pray that I may not follow any voice that calls from the timber, whatever name it uses. I ask for your own sake. I thank God again that you wrote feeling better, and I would have you keep in that way. Let the spring air do you good. Do not overdo your strength. If you grow weary, rest. If you feel unwell, do not hide it out of love for me. Love does not ask for secrecy. It asks for truth. When I read your letter, I felt, for a little while, like a man returned to his own hearth. Hold fast, my beloved. Write again as soon as you are able. Your words are a cord to me, and I feel how much I need such a cord now that Caleb is gone. I will bring this letter to a close, for the light is failing and duty calls early. Give my love to your mother and my respectful remembrance to your father. Remember me kindly to any who inquire after me. Tell them I am yet preserved, though much tried. Then I put my trust in the Lord, who is a present help in trouble, till it shall please God in His mercy to bring us together again. I remain, as ever, your true and affectionate husband, Nathaniel.